Brad, as we record this, we are in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and I was trying to think, like, what do I get Brad Geiger? I don't know if it was your birthday or Christmas that last year I got you the Ziggy phone, which I know is now a cherished household memento.
It is very cherished.
Yeah, it's like Grandpa's urn got moved off of the mantle, and now the Ziggy phone is on there. But anyway, so this year,
it's actually nice because the Ziggy phone, he's got his hand out that is supposed to hold on to the phone receiver. That's where we put Grandpa's urn.
And Ziggy just said, Brad just cut out a little voice bubble around Ziggy's face that just says, Grandpa's not with us anymore. All right, but anyway, so I'm looking around for what gift, and I stumbled upon this thing on Craigslist, and I want to share it with everybody because, okay, so here's what you have to imagine. I'm looking for a joke gift. This is the perfect joke gift. You've heard Brad and I talk about before the comic panel from the 70s, 80s called Love Is, which oddly enough featured two naked cherubs talking about what the nature of love was. Love was doing the dishes without being asked, or, I don't know, it always had some stupid phrase like that, right? And Brad and I, in a sort of Ziggy fashion, we make fun of Love Is all the time because it was just Hallmark in 70s and 80s, and it was a very specific moment in time. So somebody on Craigslist, and I sent Brad the link. Brad, if you wouldn't mind clicking the link. It was on Craigslist from San Diego, which I happen to go down to for family all the time. So I was like, I could pick this up in San Diego. It is a 25-inch framed and beautifully matted. Like, someone really cut this mat beautifully. It's 25 individual Love Is cartoons. And like, I for those of you that know matting, like, I've cut mats. Brad, have you cut mats before?
I've cut mats, yes, and I hated every minute of it.
Right,
and this has a whole bunch of these dotted all over. It looks like it's a bevel cut mat with black board behind it. So there's two layers. Yeah, and then these Love Is photo stats on top of the black board. It's gorgeous. Somebody put hours of work into this.
Yeah, and the only reason I mention the mat cutting is, Brad, you know how easy it is to mess up a mat cut. Ladies and gentlemen, someone has cut 25 individual mat cut openings into, and it might be a double mat cut, by the way, because the black one might be its own separate cut. I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, long story short, they're selling it for $25 for $12 on San Diego's Craigslist, and I was like, holy hell, this is the greatest Christmas gift I could ever give Brad. It's 25 mat framed Love Is things. And then I was thinking to myself, how the heck do I mail a glass framed picture to Philadelphia from Los Angeles? First of all, I'd have to go get it in San Diego or mail it up. What a pain in the ass. So even though it was $12, this would be such a rigmarole to get this stupid gag joke to you that, Brad, you're getting no Love Is for me for Christmas. No Love Is at all.
That's okay. Listen, no love for Christmas. I understand. But hold on, I'm confused because you've already sent me my Christmas present. I've got the Advent Jam calendar that we're gonna enjoy together, right? We have a whole system planned out. We're gonna open up the jam. We're gonna compare notes. I've already got my Christmas present.
So we are currently recording this on November 29th. We haven't actually started the Advent calendar. For those of you that remember last year, I went nuts because somehow on my radar got this thing, the Bon Maman Advent calendar. It's 24 teeny tiny little jams and honeys and spreads, right? And each one is a different flavor, and they're all bonkers. It's like strawberry plus a Bulgarian rhubarb, and you're like, what? What's a Bulgarian rhubarb? I have no idea what this is. And by God, they're all delicious and weird. And so I got one for Brad too, because I was like, by God, next year I'm going to FaceTime him every day, and we're going to try a jam, and we're going to have delightful Christmas fun. And so Brad has the Bon Maman calendar. I've got it. Are you willing to FaceTime me every day, and we're going to open up a jam and try?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, good.
We will do our taste of the day. I'll just bring it in here to the studio because by the time you get up, it'll be later in the morning here. So I'll have it here. I'll have some toast or something to put it on. And all I've got to say is I think this year is going to be the tastiest Christmas ever.
Oh, see?
And that's, that's all I'm going to say.
I wanted to capstone it with a love is friends. Just know that the friendship was there, that I immediately thought of you as soon as I saw this shitty comic. And by the way, the Craigslist listing, I should read this because I had no idea. So Love Is, this is the Craigslist listing underneath it. First they describe what it is, right? And then they say Love Is a comic panel created by New Zealand cartoonist Kim Casale in the 1960s. First of all, I had no idea that it was New Zealand. Did you know it was a Kiwi cartoonist? I had no idea.
No idea. No idea.
The cartoons originated from a series of love notes that Kim Casale drew for her husband, Roberto Casale. They were published in booklets in the late 1960s before appearing in panel form in a newspaper in 1970 under the name Kim. They were syndicated soon after, and the strip is syndicated worldwide by Tribune Content Agency. One of her most famous drawings, Love Is Being Able to Say You Are Sorry, published on February 9th, 1972, was marketed internationally for many years in print. Anyway, so let's just skip to the chase.
Yeah.
Did you know that this was a New Zealand comic?
No, I had no, and actually it makes it kind of sweet that they were love notes to her husband. That is kind of sweet, but also, again, I don't know that I've ever looked at it this close as when I did that close-up on the Craigslist ad. I never realized the female character has nipples, the male character does not. They both have belly buttons. Neither one of them have genitalia, but she's got nipples, he doesn't. And now, what's the point of that?
Brad's burying the lead. They're both super nude, and you're like, why? Yeah. Why are they super nude? And then secondly, Brad, that's a commonly known thing, that the way you tell a human female from a human male is the nipples. Males don't have nipples. That's how you know. Just like with a dog, you got to flip them over. With a human, you gotta get the nipples out, and that's how you know.
And again, knowing that these were love notes, were there some love notes that were not newspaper friendly? That's what I want
to know. God, I don't want to know. And for those of you that are overseas or never had this syndicated into your market or never grew up with it, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, you got to Google it. It's Love Is ... It's the three ellipses. And then it's two, I'm just going to describe it for you. It's two black and white line art characters. They're always kind of facing directly.
They're always facing directly forward. Yep. Yeah, there's not a lot of action there.
They're about 2 heads high. They're naked as jaybirds. They both have the Barbie smooth mound, and it's very uncomfortable because it's just drawn in a. I don't like any of it, and they're about 2 heads high. And one of them doesn't have nipples. It's fairly awkward.
Well, and in the most, I don't know whether this is a sublime or lazy. You can tell me, but every one of them goes the same way. Love is, and then it completes the sentence. Love is a warm puppy on a cold afternoon. Love is bratwursts on the grill. Love is, singing in the bathroom. And it's all this sappy, sentimental kind of stuff that was very big in the 70s. This probably was one of the more syndicated features in newspapers in the 70s. It was ubiquitous.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I think, Brad, and you as a former newspaper man can tell me if this is true, it was not a perfect square. It was taller than it was wide. Yeah. But it also could be cut to varying sizes. So, you know what I mean by that in terms of it was basically what I'm getting at is it was column heighted. It was not perfectly squared. So if you're laying out, especially when you were physically laying out a newspaper and you needed to fill an extra 2 or 3 inches, bing, bang, boom, you can slot in a Love Is, and who even cares if it's today's Love Is? It could be from last week. No one will notice. No one tracked
How could you keep track? It's the same joke every time.
Yeah, and by the way, Brad is really liberally using the word joke there. I don't know that they ever had a joke. Because it was always like, love is holding hands as you walk through the rain. It was always like, all right, that is love, I guess. But anyway, so Brad, with love in my heart, there is no love in the mail for you. You are not getting the $12 double matte framed Love Is from San Diego Craigslist. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show where love is making comics
And love is making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, who's mainly surprised that what a thing that a New Zealand cartoonist broke into the biggest cartoon market in the world with that.
Yeah.
Like, even she must have been like, what the heck? How did I do this? This is bonkers.
What happened here?
I'm the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and the co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my little cherub, my little naked cherub with the Barbie smooth mound. All right. I don't want to think of you with a Barbie smooth mound. That's unfortunate. All right. So this first question, Brad, comes in from Tom over at patreon.com/comiclab. And Tom writes, I've noticed that Brad seems to have switched up his social media strategy recently. He changed his avatar to his Evil Inc. logo, is posting some uncensored NSFW content, and is retweeting the work of other artists more frequently than before. Just being more active in general. You know what? That's what his doctor recommended, is a little more activity. And he's trying to...
Being a little bit more active in general, yes. Which isn't hard.
Yeah, so good, well spotted, Tom. So anyway, what's the why behind this? Because, you know, Brad always asks, what's the why behind the what? Yeah. What's the why behind this? Are you seeing returns on new traffic? As someone who only posts a couple times a week, I'm curious if these other forms of engagement are meaningful. So, Brad, I also noticed that you changed your social media image, and I also noticed that you were tweeting stuff that you previously had sort of held back on. Yeah. And I did not necessarily notice you're tweeting more stuff, but I would like you to talk about all of this, because this does seem like a pretty significant change.
Well, yeah. So I have been experimenting on social media. I've been doing a lot of things on social media, trying to find a little bit of a heartbeat in a social media landscape that has really gone soft recently. It is absolutely, Twitter has just gone down the chute, and Blue Sky, Mastodon, and Threads really haven't, in my estimation, developed to the point where they're ready to replace. Instagram has never been high on my list and has never been particularly beneficial in terms of return on investment. Facebook is long since forgotten. I don't think anybody takes Facebook seriously anymore. So...
the craziest aunt in your family still does. And I don't need to know your family. I can guarantee you that's the case.
Oh my God, yes. So taking them one at a time, the social media image. So one of the things that I've also been trying to do is make myself a little bit more available for podcast appearances, to try to
okay.
Yep. Just especially to talk about my work in Not Safe for Work comics, because since Twitter really isn't giving me the returns that I need to find the people who don't know who I am. We've talked about this on the show, right? Yeah. Patreon seems to think I need more ways of talking to people who are already my backers. I don't need that. I need to find the people who don't know who I am. And by the way, it's been working. Like, I could tell when I did a podcast appearance last week, or the show went live last week, and I could tell when it went live because I woke up to a bunch of new Patreon backers that I hadn't had.
Really? Really?
Yeah, it was very effective. But, when I go on a podcast, I'm shot out of a cannon. I can talk, I can emote. They said, yeah, we're going to have you on for a 15-minute interview, and that'll be just fine. And I'm like, yeah, sure. You want to do 15 minutes? We can do 15 minutes. An hour and a half later, they were saying, okay, we got to wrap this up. We got to go. And I'm like, yeah, great, fine, fantastic. If you ever want me back, they said, they're like, they don't have somebody to talk about art-related issues. It was a podcast that concentrated on NSFW work. It's called Wholesome Addiction. And I'm like, this is good placement for my brand. They talk about these kind of issues, but never had anybody to talk about art. Right. And so I came in talking about comics, and we recorded an hour and a half. So so I've been doing that. And I also noticed that there's somebody that does a Twitter Spaces podcast. Have you ever seen some of these Twitter Spaces? It'll say at the top somebody's talking, right?
Can I be an old man? No, I've never.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to go for Twitter Spaces. I'm being 100% awesome. Or not awesome.
It literally
I'm
just
100% honest.
It literally just pops up like when you've got Twitter open.
Where?
It'll say,
like, where though? Where?
At the top of the screen, at the top of your screen, it'll say like Joe Blow is talking, and you can click on it, and you can hear a live podcast being recorded.
But do you have to be a follower of Joe Blow in order? I'm not joking.
Yes,
okay.
you do. Yes, you do.
Okay, so you've got to be following them. You know what I'm realizing too, though, and this is, I might as well admit this. I have muted damn near everybody that I follow on all of my socials. I'm not kidding. You know why? Because I really found it to be a waste of time to, and I'm not being insincere there. I love everybody that I follow. I want to post. I want to be able to post, get in, get out, get back to work, you know?
Yep.
And I'm finding it less efficacious for me to go on social media and see what people are doing, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've muted, and that might be a bad move, especially in light of the changes you're making. So,
well, yeah, I'm not ready to say one way or the other on that, but I will say, like, every now and again, this person does a Twitter Spaces podcast. In other words, you can listen and it's live. It's happening right now. And it's for Not Safe for Work comics. And this person gets a lot of people listening to the show. Like, I can see they've got hundreds of people listening to it live. And then you can go back and listen to old episodes on a website. And so it's just like a podcast, except since it's on Twitter Spaces, you can listen to it being recorded live, right?
Right.
So I noticed when I jumped into there, I noticed everybody else is using icons and images and stuff like that, and because they're not safe for work comics people, right?
Oh.
And here's old man Geiger with his gray hair and his glasses. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to use my logo, because after I listened to this one, I was going to pitch myself as a guest later in a private DM. And I wanted to, I felt self-conscious about my face. So I thought it was better branding to use the logo, because I blended into the group more. Everybody else was using logos and so forth. Wasn't a lot of faces there. So to fit community norms in that case, I just used my logo. Oh, and by the way, I will be showing up on that podcast coming up, I think sometime in January. And that I wanted that specifically because I want to get a chance to talk to a whole bunch of not safe for work comics artists, so I can talk about the importance of Patreon content exchanges, especially in the light of us trying to replace social media, the things that we got from social media. Every time I pitch a content trade with somebody, they think that I'm trying to scam them. And so if I get a chance to get a whole bunch of them together and explain what's going on, that's worth my time to show up and do a podcast. So the change of the avatar was just me matching that community that I was trying to fit into. As far as the rest, you're absolutely right. I've been trying to post more. I've been trying to focus on my posts again with the one reason that I am planning on launching a Kickstarter in the first part of 2024. And I really am worried about doing that with Twitter the way it is right now. And I feel I've got to do whatever I can right now to prepare for that, to see if I can make anything happen on Twitter. And by the way, I'm also mirroring it on my other platforms. But I've been finding out. So basically, I've got a whole spreadsheet, Dave, I've got the entire week planned in what I'm going to post. I post at certain times throughout the day. And because there's no software that I know of that allows you to, like, if it was Later or Hootsuite, I'd just bite the bullet and pay the monthly fee, even though both of those have gotten outrageous for their monthly fees, just so it would allow me to schedule posts. But I haven't found conclusively that any one of those allows you to post to all of those platforms. So I literally have all these tabs open on my desktop, on my Chrome browser, and I use Twitter as my lead, but then I'll go into my spreadsheet, and as I'm working through the day, load them up in the little tabs. When it's the right time, I'll hit fire on or publish on all of them, fire them off, and I've been doing that at pretty much odd numbered hours because it helps me stay organized. 9 o'clock in the morning, 11:30, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 11 at night. I've got that many that I am. But here's the thing.
What?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. You got to understand. I do webcomics.com. I do Comic Lab. I do Evil Ink. I do Evil Ink After Dark. I've got so much content. 9/10 of that stuff is literally copy paste. I copy paste the webcomics.com intro in the link. I can do it in a half a second, right? But I've got so much content that it's really not hard to do. I throw all that out and a couple of promos for Evil Ink After Dark and Patreon. I can have it all done. I can have everything all planned out very, very quickly because I got a metric shitload of content that I can spread around. Right. So I've been doing that. It's all in a spreadsheet. It's all planned out. And it's also been doing good at giving me some, a little mental break. Because if I get into the zone, I can start drawing for hours on end and never come up for air, which is good for your back. So I've been doing that. And so I've been doing another thing on the even numbered out.
And if I remember your studio, you have to physically get up from where you're drawing, walk around to a different desk and go to your administrative computer, right? And so
yes, I purposefully have it set up that way. Like I don't even have software that I need loaded on. I don't have software that I would need to prepare social media and all that stuff.
Oh, that's
I don't even have
smart.
it loaded. Yeah, it would be difficult for me to do it from that workstation. So I got to get up and come over here, at least stretch around a little bit. So on even numbered hours, again, to give myself a little break, and I thought this would be like a 5-minute thing. I go on even numbered hours. What you're going to do when you're sitting in the studio, not when you're at home, when you're sitting in the studio, you're going to open up each of your social media platforms that you're focusing on: Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, and Mastodon. Open up each one of them on the even numbered hours, find one thing to share, and just share it, just to be social. Just to engage in that part of social media. It's one of the 4 C's that we talk about all the time.
Sure, it is. Yep.
None of us do it enough. Right?
I do not.
So
I do
share. Not. Yeah. So here's what I want to talk about today. I want you to do this. I want everybody listening at home to do this because 2 things. Number 1, you find out how difficult it is to find something worth sharing. What I thought was 5 minutes turned into 20 minutes, and I had to start like setting a timer because I would just scroll trying to find something worth sharing, and I couldn't. And then I find it on finally something on Twitter. I'd go to Blue Sky, I'd have the same problem. And in doing this, here's the second thing I want to say. In doing this, I learned so much about what makes a post shareable because I saw all this stuff that was not shareable. So it made me bring up this old episode of Comic Lab. This goes back, Dave, to episode 48. Okay, way back when we were in double digits, we
Can
talked
I
about
just say,
share
when
thoughts.
when you pull a reference like this, and then you also say that you have
Yeah.
a spreadsheet for your social media posting, I'm like, God damn, I am so unorganized compared to Brad Geiger, and I'm organized. So, like, how do you do this? How do you keep track of the show episodes, and how do you keep track? God, I'm impressed by you this morning. Keep going. I mean, I'm just kind of wallowing in how I'm failing compared to Brad Geiger here, but keep going.
You know what? It's your fault. 2 years ago, you could count on one hand the number of spreadsheets that I had done ever. A spreadsheet, nothing. And we started using spreadsheets. We started using spreadsheets for Comic Lab. You know, that one real big one that we've got that has, you know, the topics and everything. And we started using spreadsheets, and I started kind of understanding how they work. Now I use spreadsheets for everything. It's ridiculous the number of spreadsheets I've got going on in my life. I've got 3 of them open over here on this tab right now. The 3 different spreadsheets, 2 of them for Comic Lab, for crying out loud. So I wanted to talk about share thoughts really quick as we're rounding out this topic, because we haven't addressed it in a little while. And it all goes back to my renewed efforts for social media. And again, you see how hard it is. If you try this experiment, and you don't have to do it as ridiculous as I'm doing it, but if you try it once or twice a day just to try to find something worth sharing, you'll see how hard it is. And you'll see the mistakes that we're all making. Yeah. Because we're not putting share thoughts into our social media posts. And by the way, I know it seems as if you should just be able to post your comic and that would be enough, but it's not enough. Because go back to T-shirt psychology, another episode from way back when. The reason somebody shares something on social media is the same reason they buy a T-shirt. It's in part to tell the world who they are. And your comic may not do that alone, but what you say about that comic might. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
That's why I always tell you pride and joy. You can't go wrong with pride and joy. Post about your pride, post about your joy. Those are things people can share in, right? But let's go back, episode 48. They said, and this was from Patricon. We went to Patricon in 2019, and these guys were talking about posting on social media. They said, what is the share thought? In other words, what thought does this post cause that would inspire them to share the post? And the share thought typically fell into one of 3 categories. Number 1, it made the user feel an emotion. Number 2, it made an important connection with the user. Or number 3, it helped explain information to the user, right? Okay. As you're posting yourself on social media, if you can come up with one of those 3 or another that you think is viable, the question you're trying to ask is, why would somebody share this? And by the way, I know you think that the comic is enough, but we're awash in content. You've got to do something more. That's why I get sometimes upset when somebody wastes their words on their post. They tell you, this is no shoes for Tuesday number 3. Well, I don't care about the title, and I don't care about how many you've done. Right? Because I'm awash in content. I don't care that this is number 3 or number 301. You've got that little bit of space up there to do something. And if you're wasting it with the comic's title or how many comics or what day this ran or anything else, you're really hurting yourself, right? And you're not giving me, now I'm even twice as mad because you're not giving me what I need. I need a reason to share that comic, and you're not giving it to me. And by the way, please support my Patreon is also not a reason.
Gang, what Brad is telling us is he has needs and we're not fulfilling those needs. And that's important. Yes. As friends, we're not fulfilling his needs. And so.
Yes. Oh, my God. I'm telling you, I challenge you to do this, to try to find one thing to share 3 times a day, 2 or 3 times a day on each of your social. Just find one thing that you would be willing to put on your social media feed. And if you do this, if you take my challenge for a couple weeks, you're going to learn, like I have, a ton about what makes a post shareable.
Yeah. First of all, this is all really good advice, and I fail at this a lot. I'm listening to you. I was very quiet for most of that because I'm listening to that going, oh, in a self-reflective way, oh, I'm really failing at this. I don't do share thoughts well. I don't share other people well. I don't. So I will, this is a little bit of changing the direction of the conversation, but I think it informs where I'm coming from. I find myself kind of in a depressive state when it comes to social media, in the sense that I used to swim in these waters. I loved it. It was the high point of my day to joke around with 5 to 35 other cartoonists around the world on social media every day. And in so doing, we'd also be sharing each other's stuff, and there was fun to be had. And I enjoyed sharing more random thoughts from my day in addition to the comics. And now it feels, I don't know, social media feels like a chore that I find myself actively wishing for Twitter to fall apart because I have such schadenfreude for Musk losing his shirt. You know what I mean? And like, how is that helping my business if I'm actively approaching a social media platform with schadenfreude for its failure? You know, I guess in a sort of Marie Kondo way, social media doesn't spark joy for me anymore. And it's becoming increasingly hard for me to find it to be a joy-filled place to share content. And I'm saying this only because it's a failing on my part, I think, that is influencing my ability to implement Brad's great strategies.
Yeah, well, let's not call them great strategies just yet, because there was a third part of that question.
Did it not work? Okay.
And basically, Tom says, have you been seeing increased engagement or traffic from this? And partially, Blue Sky, Threads, Mastodon, not great analytics available there because they're all in their nascent free. So how can I tell? It's hard to tell, right? It's am I getting loads of new followers? No. And even Twitter's analytics aren't great unless you sign up for their advertising. Then they let you in on better analytics. So am I getting great things from Twitter? I have no idea. Although I don't think so. I don't think that I'm doing great shakes on all of it. I can't say that, because if I really thought, even I've been doing this 3 weeks now, even 3 weeks, if I thought it was worthless, I would stop doing it and find something else to do. You know, again, I'm a big return on investment guy. I'll probably be doing this at least through the end of the year to see how things go. But is it getting great traffic? Am I seeing things? I'm not ready to say. I have no idea. I have no idea whether this is working. But I do. The one thing I do want to encourage you is to try that sharing thing, to find something of somebody else's to share 3 times a day. And by the way, if you've got several social media, do what I do. Keep those tabs open. And when you find something to share on Twitter, go to Blue Sky. And you find something to share there. I'm telling you, I've learned all kinds of things about what makes a post shareable and not shareable. And so when I'm preparing my next post, I can use that information.
Well, we're nearing the end of this topic, but give me 1 or 2 examples of things that you have learned, concrete examples of like a way that you structured a post, because I think that would be really helpful to certain listeners named Dave Kellett that maybe could use a hand on this.
Well, I drop back to pride and joy. In other words, if I talk about, I really like the line art that I achieved in this panel, right? Now, if somebody can take that, and that says that if they're sharing that says something about their aesthetic, their ability to recognize aesthetic, something like that. If I say, here's a comic that I did, and I really enjoy how this punchline landed, or I enjoyed this topic that I talked about. Right. Then somebody, if they enjoyed that punchline or if they enjoyed that topic, it's not just posting the comic. It's got the same punchline, but since I called attention to this theme or to this topic or to this concept, that's a concept, theme, or idea that maybe is important to someone. And so they're like, oh yeah, I did a comic maybe about recycling, right? Here's something that I think is really important to remember about recycling, blah, blah, blah. Boom, I can put that out. Somebody that has recycling as a thing that's close to their heart sends that out as well because it's what they would like to say as well, right?
I see.
So it's stuff like that. In other words, not just hey, support me on Patreon, because we know those messages. Join us on Patreon. We need to post that stuff too, right? But we know that, and by the way, if you think that it's because you got the word Patreon in the post and Patreon is depressing that in the algorithm, I think you need to think a little harder about why posts get shared, right? You'll see
Twitter's
people all the time
yeah.
misspelling Patreon, putting asterisks and squirrelies in there because they think if you put the word Patreon in a post, here's what happens. If you put a post out that says, support me on Patreon, think about what we just got done talking about. There is no reason for somebody else to share that post.
Right.
It's a nothing post. You need to
Right.
post it every now and again. I even post, hey, join us on Patreon. This is an example of the stuff that you get, blah, blah. But when that post doesn't get engagement, I understand why. I still need to make that post. It needs to be part of my mix, but I understand why it's not getting engagement. There's no reason for somebody to engage in that. There's nothing there.
I get it.
Right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
you can go back to spelling Patreon right. And if you think about what's going on, you actually know why that post isn't getting engagement. It's got nothing to do with the algorithm being against the word Patreon. It's got everything to do with there's no reason for somebody to share that.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger thing that, yes, Brad's perfectly right about that. It's the other one, too, is that it's not necessarily a link to Patreon that gets suppressed. It's basically any outward link gets suppressed. Like they don't want people leaving the platform. So when Twitter's code came out a while back, and we all saw that, like, you sort of have a point ranking system. And so as soon as you have an outbound link, you go down. And the way you fight that, as Brad said, is to have a more shareable post that counteracts what the algorithm wants to do, which is to suppress it. So you get a couple hundred people sharing it, and that counteracts it.
I'll give you one more, by the way, if you want another share thought for you. When in doubt, ask a question.
I noticed you've been asking a lot of questions. Yes.
Yes. Yes. People love to tell you what they think. And it could be about anything. Or just give, and I've been doing this at least once a day too, and that is, hey, post me what you're working on right now on your drawing board. Just show me what your work is right now, even if it's unfinished. Give me a random panel from your comic. One of them was your comic logo. Let's share our comic logos, right? Well, those kind of posts generate tons of engagement. Why? Because people love to participate. So if you attach that onto a comic that you've done, if you do a comic about pistachio ice cream and you say, do you like pistachio ice cream? Guess what? You're going to get engagement because people have thoughts on that shit. Right? So if it isn't pride, if it isn't joy, if it isn't some kind of shared thought and you can't think of what to do, ask a question. People love answering questions because they're walking around with thoughts. Nobody's asking them what they think. You're going to ask them what they think. They're going to jump in.
Sure. And I get where you're going with, in that the opinions are like assholes and that everybody has one. So I know what you're going with there. But my problem, and again, this goes back to, and I think I'm not the only one that feels this, I don't care about the response. And so I feel fake in asking something like that. You know what I mean? Like, hey, how's your logo design going? I don't care. I'm becoming more curmudgeonly in that respect. You know, like I'm just being honest about it. Like I find myself disenchanted with social media in that I don't care for the social aspect.
It's so weird for me to be on the other side of this conversation because usually this is me. Like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. And it's really very little just to, when somebody posts that thing that here's my logo, is to say something that's either just to favorite it and move on, Or if you're going to say something, just say, oh, wow, I would have never thought to, make my logo as illegible as that, or what, but all of that, but nice. That's what a nice logo that is. What a nice use of color. It's all that stuff that grandma taught you, right? Find something nice to say. Oh, look at that. What a nice character that is.
I'm just being honest with you that I can't muster the energy to do it. It's like, how an introvert, they need to take 10 seconds to sort of steel themselves before they walk into a party because they know that their social battery is about to be drained. I find that I'm like, what am I doing? I have to steel myself to go on social media because I just don't care anymore. I'm just being honest about it. Like I can tell that I'm in a mood about social media. I see that. Yeah, I'm saying this out loud. What I'm saying is follow Brad's advice, not mine. I'm in a weird place about social media where I wish I could wish it into a cornfield like that Twilight Zone episode. I dislike all of it lately. I dislike the superstructures that are in place. I dislike the companies that are behind it. I dislike the algorithms that guide them. And I dislike how it makes me feel when I go on there. I don't know. But I know that I need it for my business. I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm I'm coming to you as a friend saying something's not firing with me on it, and I don't know how to dig myself out of that emotionally. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Dave, I tell you what, ever since you mentioned doing it last time that we were talking, I've been champing at the bit to get an update. You went through in what I can only phrase as a fit of frenzy. One of the more passive-aggressive things I've seen you do. You were so upset about the free membership tier on your Patreon. You went through and took the time to individually delete everybody who was at the free membership level on both of your Patreon, which had to take you, honest to goodness, couple hours?
No, I was listening to something in the background, and I did it all. I did all of Sheldon and all of Drive in about 50 minutes, something like that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I will say that this was a peak of smallness.
I loved seeing it.
I'll be honest, people that have been listening to the show the last couple of weeks have seen in my mood an increasing perturbance, shall we say, disappointment in this free membership tier on Patreon because from a marketing standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from an advertising standpoint, from a financial standpoint, I see what they are trying to do. If you're looking at it from an idealistic standpoint, they're trying to recreate a social media model that's free, where your readers will not be algorithmically blocked from what you want to share with them. I get that. But I think there's a better way to implement it than rolling it into the main core of Patreon. And so fundamentally, I just disagree with the idea of free membership. You could ignore it before when it was this sort of followers thing and no one really paid attention to it, right? But now that they have made it front and center in this new social media type push for Patreon, where you can have free followers, something about it, Brad, I'm just admitting to you that I am small about it. I do not like the idea of it, right?
So I did I think I took a dozen people and deleted them because what I was listening for was a shout, a cry of pain. Somebody saying, "Hey, you deleted me! I had signed up for the free membership tier, and I was expecting certain things, and out of my sample of 12." I got zero. Nobody mentioned that they were upset that I had cut them from the free membership tier. But it was a small sample. So what I'm desperate to talk about today is you cut everybody. It had to be hundreds, right? How many people got back in touch saying that they were upset from being cut from their membership?
So overall, between the two Patreons, Sheldon and Drive, I think I ended up culling about 500 people, quote unquote, and because I'm not 100% sure they were all people. And not a single squeak from anyone saying, "Hey, why did I get knocked off the Patreon freebie level?" And here's what I think is happening. So Brad and I have both been on Patreon for about 9 years. I think that's a rough estimate, about 9 years, right? I think, Brad, that anytime someone gets bumped off for missing a payment, or was a backer but is no longer a backer, or has at some point expressed an interest, obviously by following, they get put into this free tier. Sometimes not even by choice. I think basically a lot of them are former backers, right? That for a myriad reasons on their own have decided to no longer back. So I went in, and by the way, I should leave with this big caveat. I am not recommending this for anyone. This is my own smallness that I got rid of all of these free members. I don't recommend it. It probably is not smart business strategy. I think it potentially might even piss off Patreon if they found out that I did this. So I am 100% not recommending this. But what I did is Brad happened to mention in passing, "Well, you know, Dave, if you're so mad about these free followers, you can get rid of them." And I said, "Oh, how can I get rid of them?" And he goes, "Just block them and then unblock them. It takes 2 seconds. You have to go through each individual person, but you can block them and unblock them. And then by having done so, they are no longer a free member, but in the future, they are allowed to join you as a patron." And I said, "This is a miracle. I 100% want to do this." And so I did it for Drive first, not a peep over a 24, 48-hour period from anyone. So I'm like, I'm doing it for Sheldon too. So I did it for Sheldon. Brad, no one cared. No one responded like, what's happening? Why am I, what's going on? Why have I knocked off the free follower? No one responded in any way, shape, or form. There was no complaints. There was no interest. There was no spark, because I think for the most part, not everyone, my followers were former backers, former patrons that no longer cared anyway. You know, they had been automatically assigned to this category. They didn't want to be there. And then I'll be honest, there were a fair chunk that I wasn't sure were real humans. So I don't know if now that this has been opened up, if botnets have been unleashed. I'm not saying Patreon's doing it. I'm saying somebody's botnet has been unleashed to sign up for this. I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. I have zero evidence. But there was a lot of cases where I told Brad, part of my frustration is if the idea for this on Patreon's part is to move people up the ladder, great. I get it. They come in as a free follower. You move them up to a $1, $2, $3 backer. A few years after that, you move them up to a $5, $10 backer. I get it. I understand that. Well, here, if that was the case, if that's what they wanted, what they should do is allow for posts that allow me to directly reach out only to the free people, right? So that I don't have to bug my paying patrons by saying, hey, here's 20 reasons why you should join us on paid Patreon. Because what does that benefit me to annoy my paying patrons just to try to reach my free patrons, which is what you currently have to do. And so Brad says, well, you could try to reach out to them by email. So I go into my list of 550 or so free followers, and Brad, a third of them don't have a listed email, which, by the way, I don't even know how that allowed for it, but how am I supposed to reach these people is the point. Like, it's beyond frustrating to me why this category exists. And then I can't reach them through customized free posts, and I can't reach them by email. What am I supposed to do? How does this benefit me in terms of raising them up the ladder, right?
And the way we talked about it last time, like you in trying to talk to your free members, you risk confusing your paid members. Right? Now you're really screwing things up because you got to figure out how you're going to post so you're not confusing your members. By the way, you don't want to post like nonsense there, because then your paid members are getting way more content from you than they signed up for. Then they start to throttle back their notifications. Then they miss the content that they did pay for. Next thing you know, they're canceling their membership because they're not getting what they signed up for. And
Right,
technically, it's their own fault because they throttled back notifications. But this whole situation caused that to happen. So yeah, it's like we said, we hate the free membership tier. It doesn't make any sense. It's not being implemented very wisely, and not for nothing. I think I take a half an hour. I've spent a half an hour doing dumber things than that. I think it was probably time pretty well spent.
Well, and you might be saying, listener at home, Dave, you're seeing this all wrong. Those 550 people, you should not have called them. Those were your opportunity to grow those into paying patrons. My response is, if I got somebody to Patreon, by the way, I don't know that there were many people that did this. I've got them to Patreon and they decided to go free rather than to pay. That's a problem right there, right? That's a marketing problem. It's an advertising problem. It's a fundamental crux of the point of Patreon. That is a problem. Yeah. Secondly, I don't know that there were a lot of people that chose that. I think there were a lot of people that auto-assigned from previous patronage or I don't know what from years past, like the historical relationship over 9 years. I think I just accrued 550 people that didn't want to be in this category. But secondly, there's no good way to communicate to these people on a consistent basis and not annoy the paid people, like Brad said. So anyway, so all of that is, but a secondary thing came up with this, Brad, and I started texting you about this because just by chance, I happened to notice that Patreon delayed their initial public offering for their stock because their fair market value valuation came in at a 70% drop from what it previously was, right? And I'm not kidding when I say I think this directly relates to why Patreon is making this push for juicing up everybody's follower count, right? So let me tell you where I'm going with this. In 2021, Patreon needed to raise more money. So they sold their Series F fundraising round for $155 million. They raised $155 million, but they raised that money based on a valuation of $4 billion. That's basically saying to the world, hey, we're worth $4 billion. If you'd like to buy into Patreon, this is the price because it's based on a fair market value of $4 billion. Enough people did. They got some investors. They got $155 million. Great. Bada bing, bada boom. Then a couple years later, I think it was last year, Patreon started to prepare for their initial public offering, their IPO of stock. And to do that, generally what you do is you prepare what's called a 409A. I know these are a lot of numbers and letters, but the 409A is basically an outside auditor comes in, reviews the overall status of the company, and under IRS guidelines, they issue like, hey, here's what we think under standard auditory, accountant practices, here's what we think the fair market value of this company is. And that's what a 409A is. And that way everybody can know, okay, we're all on the same ground about what the fair market value of the company is. I would like to buy this stock in 6 months when it comes out under its IPO. Anyway, long story short, from the last time that they sold Series F chunks of the company to when they did this 409A, they went from being valued at $4 billion, Brad, to $1.5 billion. That's a 70% drop for Patreon's fair market value. And this was using standard accounting practices, right? And so I think what they need to do in order to get that IPO up, they definitely delayed it, but I think over the next 18 to 36 months, they're going to try to juice their overall user base numbers, the sort of active user base, by allowing these free members in. I don't, it's not conspiratorial. I think that's a really valid way to connect the dots as to why they're doing this. I don't necessarily, we've been talking before about like, when do we start worrying about enshittification with Patreon? This might be the first inkling, and I'm quite serious about this.
Yeah, no, listen, one thing that we've said all along is that everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And Patreon will have the same arc that everything else does, as much as we don't want to think about it. And we talked about that before on the show. We said the thing to remember about that is not to panic. The thing that Patreon really had in terms of the value is getting this idea across of subscribing for content. That made a big difference in so many of our lives. And if Patreon does kind of go down the tubes, if something happens there, because as an NSFW artist myself, One of the first things I fear with an IPO is that we're the first people to finally get the boot. And but the thing about that, even if that does happen, right? The thing to remember is Patreon wasn't magic. It's not the only place that people can set up a subscription. If Patreon does go down the tubes, we just take that subscription content concept and we implement it another way. There are lots of people who are going to scarf up Patreon's users if users start to leave the platform. There's also people out there who have done their own subscription software or implemented that without a platform. Not for nothing. That's what I've been doing on webcomics.com for over 10 years. I don't do a platform. I run my own subscription system through my WordPress site. So it is possible. It is possible. I'll say right off the bat, the reason that I don't do that for After Dark and some of my other properties is that Patreon takes so much of the hassle, the red tape. So much of the pavement is flattened and made nice for me. I've never had to worry about paying European tax, value-added tax for my digital content. You know why? Patreon handles all of that automatically. And if I were to leave Patreon and do my own subscription software, whether I did not safe for work or safe for work, all of a sudden that digital content is taxable under certain circumstances. And now I got to figure out to do that. Now, do you remember trying to figure out UK value-added taxes for shipping physical things?
Yes.
Have you, by the way, where did you land on that with your last Kickstarter? Will you even ship to the UK right now if you were to do a Kickstarter today?
So I'm prepping for the next Kickstarter, and I don't think I will. I don't know. Yeah. I love my UK readers. The value-added tax for Britain is bonkers. But I want to jump back on this.
Figuring out how to pay it.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that I want to reinforce is that when Brad talks about Patreon smoothing a lot of the bumps in the road, I just want to remind everybody that, like, my curmudgeonliness aside regarding free membership, I love Patreon. I love what it does. I love the core business model. 95% of what it does works just like I want it to, and I could not be happier with it. I if anything, my fears about their IPO coming up probably around 2 to 3 years, 2 to 4 years from now, is that all the things that I do love about it, genuinely love and are appreciative of about it, might start to fall apart a little bit. So it's more of a fear of what might come rather than any sort of complaint about what's happening right now. Does that make sense, Brad, in terms of couching my criticisms of this?
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And you're probably right in terms of that, because it's going to take a little while for that valuation to get reset. You know, this is something that's going to be hopefully in at least a couple of years in the offing, but it is something to keep an eye on. And it's something that we have to keep in mind as they continue to try to reimagine what Patreon is. A lot of that is going to come from this angle. And we're just gonna have to realize, you know, we're gonna have to grin and bear it if we want to continue to use the platform. This is what we're going to be looking at.
Yeah, but I do think, and listen, let's be optimistic about the time ahead. I do think we have a few years before their IPO, mainly because there hasn't been a bunch of tech IPOs that have been super gangbusters, and in fact, a lot of stock at the very end of tech stock at the end of the pandemic took it on the chin. So I think that kind of buys us some time, Brad, because a lot of those Series A through Series F investors, they want the biggest bang for their buck, and they're probably willing to wait another 36 months to get a bigger bang, right? So I think we have a little more time. And in the meantime, Patreon is serving me well. Overall, I love it. I just, for whatever reason, I personally took umbrage with this free followers thing. And I also want to say, by the way, you might be the kind of cartoonist for whom free followers works great. I want to acknowledge that, and I want to wish you well with it. I'm glad that you have found a way that you can communicate to both paid and free followers in a way that works for you. I recognize that it's different strokes for different folks, and not everybody has to walk the same way up the platform. This is me saying, Brad, that I'm trying to be altruistic. Not in the sense that I don't have to be right about this. Just for me, it was pissing me off that this existed. But I neither recommend anyone else do it, and I also recognize that my umbrage might not be universally shared. I know this was specific to me, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to put it. Well, listen, that means we've got to go from your umbrage to my umbrage, that because we're at the end of another show, and I've got to tell you that you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
And when it's raining outside, it's time for Brad to open his umbrage, and that didn't work. I didn't land that plane, Brad. That joke did not work. Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator and cartoonist and all-around genius behind Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And careful listeners will notice that Brad just aged 40 years in that last sentence. That was really fun to hear. I don't know if you could hear it. Brad was like, Dave Kellett is co-director of Strip.
I was trying not to have to clear my throat in the middle of a sentence. God dang it.
I'm so glad I let that go as water under the bridge, huh? All right, Comic Lab, the theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by the ever wonderful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. But thank you so much for all those 5-star reviews coming in on Spotify particularly. You are really helping keeping us right at the top. If you haven't done it, this is your chance to give Comic Lab a little present here in the new year. You can give us a 5-star review and help us keep 2024 right up on top.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So we'll go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/ I regret using the phrase Barbie Smoothmound.
That was particularly blue of you to. I noticed you said that, and I'm like, you really said that. I am really corrupting you.
Well, because having worked at Mattel, when you had like a naked Ken in your hand, it was like he was wearing those tight leotards for the Bolshoi Ballet. Like there was a mound, there was something, but it wasn't prominent. It was like he was ready to dance. You know, he was going to do Swan Lake.
Yeah, was it more bulge or mound?
No, it was bulge implies definition. There was zero definition. Like the sculptors were basically like, how can I sculpt a semi-deflated beach ball and make it as ambiguous as possible? And that's what they achieved with Ken. It's a smooth mound.
God. If I never hear the word mound again for the next 2 weeks, I'll be very happy.
Well, everyone, that wraps it up for this week. Tune in next week when the episode title will be Ken Smooth Mound.